Most people get a toast on their 30th birthday. I got a public execution. When my father tapped the microphone and announced to the entire room that they were disowning me to protect the family, he expected me to crumble. He counted on my shame. But as I walked toward the stage, clutching the manila envelope that proved every lie they had ever told, I realized something terrifyingly simple. I wasn't the one who needed to be afraid anymore. The dress was a deep emerald green silk that I had bought 3 months ago solely because it made me feel armored. It did not cling. It did not apologize. It draped over my frame with a structural elegance that suggested I was a woman who paid her own bills and made her own decisions. Standing in front of the hallway mirror in my apartment, I smoothed the fabric down over my hips and took a long, steadying breath. 30. It was a heavy word, round and final. For most people, turning 30 was a milestone of youth fading into adulthood, a time for panic about careers or marriages. For me, it felt like a finish line I had crawled across on my hands and knees. The last year had been a silence so loud it rang in my ears. I called it low contact. My therapist called it necessary survival. My mother called it a phase. I checked my reflection one last time. I looked calm. That was the most important thing. I needed to look like the daughter who had finally figured it out, the one who could sit through a 3-course dinner without letting her voice shake when her father corrected her posture or her mother asked if she was still seeing that therapist. Tonight was supposed to be the truce. The text from my brother, Grant, had arrived 2 weeks ago. It was lengthy and filled with the kind of corporate therapeutic buzzwords he had adopted since his promotion. He wrote about healing and bridges and the importance of family landmarks. He said Mom and Dad wanted to host a dinner, just family and a few close friends, a celebration of my new decade, a fresh start. I wanted to believe him. God help me. I wanted it so badly that I ignored the knot of dread sitting low in my stomach. I wanted parents who celebrated me. I wanted to sit at a table and laugh about old stories without waiting for the punchline to be my inadequacy. So I said yes. The drive to Cresthaven took 40 minutes. It was a town that smelled of old money and pine needles, where the driveways were long and the grievances were buried under layers of polite conversation and landscaping. The Glass Marigold was the kind of restaurant my father preferred. It was not about the food, which was always technically perfect and entirely soulless. It was about the lighting and the volume. It was a place where voices were never raised, where scandals were suffocated by the heavy velvet drapes and the carpet that was thick enough to swallow a scream. I handed my keys to the valet, a teenager who looked terrified of scratching the paint on the line of luxury sedans in front of me. My Honda looked out of place, dusty and practical, but I held my head high as I walked up the stone steps. The air inside was cool and smelled of lilies and roasted garlic. The maitre d' checked his list and gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "The Russell party is in the private conservatory," he said. "Right this way. Miss Russell, the conservatory. Of course. We couldn't just have a table. We needed a stage." As I followed him through the main dining room, I adjusted my clutch. I had prepared topics of conversation: my job at the graphic design firm, the new apartment complex being built downtown, safe subjects, neutral ground. I was ready to be boring. I was ready to be agreeable. Then I walked through the double glass doors into the conservatory, and my steps faltered. This was not a small family dinner. The room was bathed in the golden glow of string lights and candles. There were 3 round tables set with white linens that looked crisp enough to cut skin. And there were people, not just Grant and my parents. There were at least 20 guests. I recognized neighbors from my childhood, people I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. There was Mrs. Gabler from the Historical Society. There was the entire board of the Library Trust. And there was a photographer. A man in a black polo shirt with the logo Northline Events embroidered on the chest was moving around the perimeter, snapping candid shots of people holding champagne flutes. He turned his lens toward me as I entered, the shutter clicking in a rapid burst that made me feel like a specimen being catalogued. My brother Grant detached himself from a group near the bar and came striding toward me. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my car, his teeth gleaming, his hair perfectly coiffed. He looked like the golden child he was. the son who had never made a mess, never strayed from the path, never questioned the narrative. "Piper," he said, opening his arms, "the birthday girl. You look fantastic." He hugged me, and I smelled his expensive cologne, something musky and sharp. I stiffened, then forced myself to relax. "Fresh start," I reminded myself. "Grant," I said, pulling back. "I thought this was just going to be us." "Oh, you know Mom," he said, laughing and guiding me further into the room with a hand firmly on my back. "She couldn't help herself. She is just so proud of you. She wanted to mark the occasion properly. Look, everyone is here to support you. Support me." The word felt odd. Support me in what? Turning a year older, I scanned the room. Looking for my parents, I found them standing near the head table. My father, Gordon Russell, looked distinguished and severe in his charcoal suit. He was holding a scotch, his other hand in his pocket, listening to a woman I didn't recognize. My mother, Elaine, was beside him. She wore a pale blue dress that washed her out, her smile fixed and tight. It was the smile she wore when she was calculating the social cost of a moment. But it was the person sitting at the table next to them who made my blood run cold. Marla Klein. She was an attorney, a family friend. Technically, but really she was my father's fixer. Marla was the one they called when a contract needed to be aggressive or a zoning issue needed to disappear. She was not a dinner party guest. She was a shark in a silk blouse. She was reviewing a stack of papers next to her place setting, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "Why is Marla here?" I asked Grant, keeping my voice low. Grant didn't miss a beat. "She is an old friend." "Piper, don't be so suspicious. It is a celebration. Relax." He steered me toward our parents. My mother saw me coming and her expression shifted. It wasn't warmth, it was relief. But the kind of relief a stage manager feels when the lead actor finally shows up on opening night. "Piper," she said, leaning in to kiss the air next to my cheek. "You made it," I smiled, my face muscles aching with the effort. "Happy to be here." "Mom, the place looks beautiful. We wanted it to be perfect," she said. She reached out and smoothed a stray hair from my forehead, a gesture that felt more like a correction than affection. "We have a program tonight. We just want everything to go smoothly. A program." I looked down at the table. Sure enough, at every place setting, there was a heavy cardstock card printed in elegant calligraphy. The 30th birthday of Piper Russell. A celebration of family, endurance, and clarity. Clarity. I felt a prickle of sweat on the back of my neck. This was wrong. All of it. The scale was too big. The tone was too formal, and the energy in the room was brittle. The guests weren't mingling naturally. They were clustered in tight groups, whispering, glancing at the head table. They looked like they were waiting for a show to begin. I took my seat. I was placed between Grant and a woman named Sheila, who had been my mother's tennis partner 10 years ago. Across from me sat Marla Klein. She looked up from her papers and gave me a nod that was professional, devoid of any warmth. "Happy birthday." "Piper," Marla said. "Thank you." "Marla?" I said. "I didn't know you were joining us," Gordon insisted. She said smoothly. She tapped the edge of the file folder on the table, just tying up some loose ends for the family. Multitasking. You know, dinner was served. It was a blur of courses I couldn't taste. A soup that tasted like heavy cream and anxiety. A piece of fish that I pushed around my plate while Grant loudly told a story about his recent promotion and how grateful he was for the mentorship of our father. Grant was working the table. He kept using words like gratitude and second chances and turning over a new leaf. He would look at me when he said them, nodding encouragingly, as if I were a recovering addict who had just completed rehab. I kept my head down. I drank water. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe this was just how they knew how to love. Maybe the formality was their way of showing they cared. I tried to focus on the fact that they had paid for all this. They had gathered these people. I should be grateful. That was the script. Be grateful. When the plates were cleared, the room grew quiet. The photographer moved into position near the head table. The lights dimmed slightly, It was time for the toasts. My mother stood up first. She held her champagne glass with both hands, her knuckles white. She looked out at the room, her eyes shimmering with what looked like tears. But I knew my mother well enough to know that tears were a weapon she deployed with sniper-like precision. "Thank you all for coming," she began. Her voice was soft, trembling slightly. "We are here to celebrate Piper, our daughter." She looked down at me. I tried to smile. 30 years, she said. "It has been a long road. We all know that Piper has always been spirited." A ripple of polite laughter went through the room. I kept my smile fixed, though my jaw was starting to hurt. "She has had her struggles," my mother continued, her voice taking on a tone of brave suffering. "We have watched her try to find her way, the career changes, the search for identity, the boundaries she felt she needed to draw against the people who loved her most." I froze. She was talking about my career in graphic design as if it were a failure. She was talking about the year I spent setting healthy limits as if it were an illness. "There were episodes," she said, sighing, "episodes that hurt the family deeply, times when we didn't know if we could reach her, but we never stopped trying. We never stopped loving. And tonight, we wanted to bring everyone together to witness this moment, to witness the reality of where we are." She raised her glass. "To endurance," she said, "to endurance." The room murmured. I didn't drink. I felt sick. This wasn't a toast. It was a public dressing down masked as a tribute. She was painting a picture of me as the prodigal daughter, the broken thing they had tirelessly tried to fix. I felt the familiar pressure building in my chest. The urge to apologize, to smooth it over, to accept the role of the problem child just to keep the peace. But I hadn't done anything wrong. I had a job. I paid my rent. I had friends who loved me. I wasn't broken. Then my father stood up. Gordon Russell did not tremble. He did not look teary. He looked like a CEO about to announce a merger. He walked to the small microphone stand that had been set up at the head of the room. He tapped it once. The sound thumped through the speakers, silencing the last few whispers. "Thank you." "Elaine," he said. He looked at me. His eyes were hard, flat stones. There was no affection in them. There wasn't even anger. There was just business. "We have all tried," he said. "We have tried for 30 years to mold Piper into someone who understands the values of this family. Integrity, loyalty, honesty." He paused. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. "But there comes a time," he said, "when parents must make the hardest decision of their lives. A decision made not out of malice, but out of necessity, out of a need for safety." Safety, I stared at him. What was he talking about? Gordon took a breath. He looked out at the guests, making eye contact with the key players in the room, the library board, the historical society, the people who mattered. "We are here tonight to announce that, effective immediately, we are disowning Piper." The air left the room. It vanished. I heard a gasp from the table behind me. Someone dropped a fork and it clattered against the china. A sharp, violent sound. I sat frozen. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't blink. I thought it was a joke. A terrible, dark, twisted joke. Gordon continued, his voice steady, reasonable. "This is a unanimous decision. It is for everyone's safety. We can no longer enable the behavior that has threatened this family for years." He gestured to Marla Klein. She opened the folder on the table and pulled out a thick document. She slid it across the tablecloth toward me. It stopped inches from my hand. "Piper," my father said, addressing the room but talking about me as if I were not there. "Piper has struggled with the truth. We have covered for her. We have protected her. But we can no longer do so. Years ago, Piper was involved in a financial irregularity regarding a family charitable initiative. She stole money. The words hit me like physical blows. Stole money. We covered it up, he said, his voice dropping to a register of deep regret. We paid it back. We tried to get her help. We hoped she would change. But she refused. She refused treatment. She refused to take responsibility. And now, she has become unstable. We cannot trust her. We cannot risk the reputation of the Russell name any longer. My body went cold. It wasn't the heat of embarrassment. It was the absolute zero of shock. I looked at the guests. They were staring at me with a mixture of horror and pity. They believed him. Why wouldn't they? He was Gordon Russell. He was the pillar of the community, and I was the daughter with the spotty record, the one who didn't come to Christmas last year, the one who was difficult. But under the shock, a gear turned in my brain. Stole money, charity initiative, memories flashed. I was 22. I was working as a program coordinator for the Russell Harbor Foundation. It was my first real job. I took it seriously. I remembered an invoice. I remembered a weird transfer request that didn't look right. I remembered asking my father about it. He had told me I didn't understand accounting. He had told me to leave it alone, and then, a week later, I was let go. They told me it wasn't a good fit. I never stole anything. I had asked a question. I looked at my father. He was watching me, waiting for me to break. He expected me to cry. He expected me to scream. He expected me to cause a scene that would prove his point perfectly. See, look how unstable she is. Marla Klein leaned in. Her voice was a low hiss, meant only for me. It is a mutual separation agreement, Piper, and a statement of admission. If you sign it, they will keep the details private. They will provide a small stipend for you to get settled elsewhere. If you don't, the police report is already drafted. I looked down at the paper. Admission of guilt. Irrevocable severance of ties. I looked at Grant. He wasn't looking at the guests. He was looking at me. His face wasn't sad. It was intense, predatory. He was watching my hands, waiting for me to pick up the pen. Suddenly, the details of the room snapped into sharp focus. The photographer was positioned to capture my breakdown. The program was written to frame the narrative of my failure. The lawyer was here to seal the deal. This wasn't a family conflict. This was a hit. They had brought me here, in front of everyone who could destroy my reputation, to execute me socially. They wanted to rewrite my history. They wanted to turn me into a thief and a liar so that whatever I knew, whatever I might remember, would never be believed. They were afraid of me. The realization hit me with the force of a revelation. They weren't doing this because I was a burden. They were doing this because I was a threat. I looked at the document again. The date of the alleged theft was listed, August 14th, 2018. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands stopped shaking. August 14th, 2018. I remembered that date, not because of a theft, but because it was the day I had learned how to archive my email locally. I had been paranoid about losing my work. I had saved everything, every request, every authorization. I looked at my mother. She was dabbing her eyes with a napkin, playing the part of the heartbroken matriarch. I looked at my father. He stood tall, the benevolent dictator making the hard choice. They thought I was the same scared 22-year-old girl who just wanted to be loved. They thought I would sign anything to make the pain stop. Slowly, I pushed my chair back. The scrape of the wood against the floor echoed in the silent room. Grant reached out a hand. Piper, just sit down. Let's handle this quietly. I ignored him. I stood up. My legs felt solid. The emerald silk dress rustled around me. I felt the armor. I didn't look at the guests. I walked past Marla Klein. I walked past the table where my mother sat weeping into her napkin. I walked up to the microphone. My father looked at me, his eyes widening slightly. He hadn't expected this. He stepped back, assuming I was coming to beg him for forgiveness. He yielded the floor, confident that whatever I said would only confirm his narrative. I gripped the microphone stand. The metal was cool under my fingers. I looked out at the room. Faces of judgment, faces of pity, faces that had already written me off. I took a breath. I am not signing anything. I said quietly. The feedback from the speakers whined slightly. My voice was steady. It was lower than usual, stripped of the pleasing lilt I used to make people comfortable. My father stepped forward. Piper, this is not the time for... I turned to him. The look on my face stopped him mid-sentence. I wasn't looking at him like a daughter. I was looking at him like a witness. You said the date was August 14th, 2018, I said. You said I authorized a transfer of funds that were stolen. You said I refused to help. I looked back at the audience. I have a hard drive in my apartment. I said, it contains a complete backup of the Russell Harbor Foundation's internal server from that year. I saved it the day I was fired. Marla Klein dropped her pen. It rolled off the table and hit the floor. I have the emails. I said, I have the transfer request. And I have the digital signature of the person who actually authorized the withdrawal of those funds. I looked directly at my father. It wasn't me. I said, and the timestamp on the authorization shows it was approved at 11 p.m. I was at a movie with Noelle Harper. But you. Dad. You were in the office. I have the security log entry to prove that, too. The silence in the room changed. It wasn't the silence of judgment anymore. It was the silence of a held breath before a crash. I turned to Marla. I won't be signing your letter, I said, but you might want to hold on to it. You might need the paper for your own notes. I let go of the microphone. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked toward the door, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the floor. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I walked out of the conservatory, through the main dining room, and out into the cool night air of Cresthaven. Behind me, the room erupted, but I didn't care. I reached into my purse and pulled out my keys. My hand was shaking now, a violent tremor that started in my fingers and worked its way up my arm. But I got the door open. I got inside my dusty, practical Honda. I locked the doors, and for the first time in 30 years, I didn't feel like a daughter. I felt like a soldier. The silence inside my Honda was not peaceful. It was a vacuum, a pressurized void where the air felt too thin to breathe. I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles had turned the color of old bone. My chest was heaving, a frantic, shallow rhythm that I couldn't control. The passenger door ripped open. Noelle Harper didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask what happened. She threw her purse into the footwell and climbed in. Slamming the door against the humid night air, she shifted in the seat, turning her entire body toward me. Breathe. Piper. I can't. I gasped. The words felt like they were scraping against sandpaper in my throat. Noelle. Look at me, she commanded. Her voice was sharp. It cut through the static in my head. Look at my face. I forced my eyes to unlock from the dashboard and look at her. Noelle had been my best friend since sophomore year of college. She had seen me through bad breakups and job losses. But she had never seen me like this. I was vibrating. Count the things you can see, she said. Do it. Now. Steering wheel. I choked out. Dashboard. Your necklace. The streetlight. Keep going. The radio. My hands. Good. Your hands are here. You are here. You are in the parking lot of the Glass Marigold. You are 30 years old. You are safe. I squeezed my eyes shut. Safe. The word sounded ridiculous. My father had just stood in front of a room full of Cresthaven's elite and declared me a thief and a mental case. He had tried to hand me a legal agreement that would have signed away my voice. They had a photographer. Noelle, I whispered. They had a program. I know, she said softly. I saw it. It was sick. Piper. It was choreographed. I opened my eyes. The panic was receding, replaced by a cold. Heavy weight in my stomach. It was the weight of clarity. I need to go. I said, I need to get out of here before they come out. Drive. Noelle said, just drive. Go to my place. Do not go home yet. You don't want to be alone right now. I shook my head. No, I have to go home. I have to find the drive. Piper. If I don't find it tonight, I said, staring straight ahead, I will start to wonder if I imagined it. I will start to think maybe they are right. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe I did authorize it and forgot. I need to see the file. Noelle. I need to see the timestamp. Noelle studied my profile for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, she said. But I am following you. I am staying on the phone with you the whole way. And if you see Grant's car, or your parents' car, You keep driving. Deal. I started the engine. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I saw the front doors of the restaurant open. Grant came out, looking frantic, loosening his tie. He scanned the lot. When his eyes landed on my car, I didn't slow down. I accelerated, the tires chirping against the asphalt, leaving the perfect family tableau behind in the rearview mirror. The next morning, the sun rose over Cresthaven with an offensive brightness. It was a Tuesday. The world was moving on. People were buying coffee, walking dogs, driving to work. They didn't know that my life had been dismantled over poached salmon and champagne less than 12 hours ago. I hadn't slept. I had sat on my living room floor with the external hard drive plugged into my laptop, staring at a folder I hadn't opened in 8 years. August 14th, 2018. The file was there. The email chain was there. The authorization form was there. I wasn't crazy, but looking at the digital file wasn't enough. My father had mentioned a police report. He had mentioned a theft. If they were building a legal narrative, there would be a paper trail outside of my hard drive. There would be filings. I showered, dressing in slacks and a blazer. I needed to look professional. I needed to look like a woman who had nothing to hide. The Cresthaven Public Records Office was located in the basement of the municipal building, a place that smelled of dust and floor wax. It was a fluorescent purgatory where the town's secrets were buried in cardboard boxes and microfilm. I walked up to the counter. The clerk was a man in his 60s with thin gray hair and a sweater vest that looked like it had been knitted in the 90s. He was eating a bagel and reading a newspaper. "Can I help you?" he asked without looking up. "Hi," I said. "I would like to request some filings for a local nonprofit, the Russell Harbor Foundation." He stopped chewing. Slowly, he lowered the paper. He looked at me over the rims of his glasses. His eyes were watery but sharp. "Russell Harbor." He repeated, "Yes, I am looking for their annual returns and board meeting minutes from 2018, specifically August through December." He didn't move for a moment. Then he sighed, wiping crumbs from his mouth with a paper napkin. "You are the second person to ask for those boxes this month," he said. My heart skipped a beat. "Who else asked?" He shrugged. "Confidential, privacy policy. You know how it is. But it is interesting. Those boxes haven't been touched in years, and now suddenly everyone is interested in the fall of 2018. He stood up and shuffled toward the back room. I leaned against the counter, my pulse thrumming in my neck. Who else? A journalist? An auditor? Or maybe my father, checking to make sure his tracks were still covered. The clerk returned 10 minutes later with a heavy banker's box. He set it down with a thud. "You can look at them here," he said. "No photos. Copies are 25 cents a page." "Thank you." I opened the box. It was a chaotic mess of manila folders. I started digging, looking for the dates. September, October, November. I found the minutes for the emergency board meeting on August 22nd, 2018. That was 1 week after I was fired. 1 week after the alleged theft. I scanned the document. It was standard corporate speak. Motion to approve budget. Motion to review vendor contracts. And then, at the bottom of page 3, I froze. Motion to grant temporary executive authority to Gordon Russell for the purpose of internal financial restructuring and risk management control. Motion passed unanimously. Temporary executive authority. Why would the board need to give him special authority? He was already the president of the board. Unless he needed to bypass the standard checks and balances, unless he needed to move money or sign documents without the treasurer's oversight. I flipped to the next month. September. Motion to amend financial control protocols. All external vendor payments under $5,000 no longer require dual signature authorization. I stared at the paper. They had lowered the drawbridge. Right after I was removed for questioning a suspicious invoice, they had changed the rules to make it easier to pay vendors without oversight. I took the page to the clerk. "I need a copy of this," I said. He took the paper, glanced at it, and then looked at me. "You know," he said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. "The other fellow who came in, he was looking for the amendments too. But he was looking for the trust filings, not the foundation ones. Trust filings. I looked at him. What trust? He just tapped the counter. 25 cents, he said loudly, returning to his official persona as a woman walked in behind me. I paid him with a quarter that felt slippery in my sweating palm. I took the copy and walked out, my mind racing. Trust filings. My grandmother, Sylvia, had set up trusts for all of us. But those were private. Why would someone be looking at them in the public records office unless something had been changed? I needed to talk to someone who knew how the foundation worked from the inside. Someone who had been there when I was fired. I needed Tessa. Tessa Linwood had been the administrative assistant at the foundation when I was the program coordinator. We used to eat lunch together in the break room, complaining about the stale coffee and the donors who demanded thank you notes for $20 checks. She hadn't answered my call. She hadn't answered my text. But when I sent a third message, I know about the invoice. Tessa. I have the backup, she had replied with a location and a time. Sable Grain Cafe was on the other side of town, away from the country club circle where my parents held court. It was noisy, filled with college students and the hiss of espresso machines. Perfect for a conversation you didn't want anyone to overhear. I saw her in a booth in the back. She was wearing a beige raincoat, even though it was sunny outside, and she was shredding a paper napkin into tiny piles of white confetti. Tessa, I said, sliding into the seat opposite her. She jumped. She looked at me, her eyes wide and fearful. She looked older than 30. She looked tired. Piper, she said, you shouldn't have contacted me. Why, I asked. Because of what happened last night, she flinched. You heard, Tessa. I was there. It was my birthday dinner. She looked down at the table. Right. Of course. God. Piper, I heard rumors. People are saying you had a breakdown, that you tried to attack your father at the restaurant. I laughed. A harsh, dry sound. Is that the version they are spinning, that I attacked him? Tessa didn't look up. They are saying you were screaming about conspiracies, that you were incoherent. I leaned forward. Look at me. Tessa, do I look incoherent? She finally met my eyes. She studied me for a long moment. No, you look focused. I am focused, because I found the files. Tessa, I found the emails from August 2018. Her face went pale. Shh, she hissed, looking around the cafe. Don't say that date. Why? What are you so afraid of? You don't work for them anymore. No, she said, but my husband works for a supplier that does business with Harborline Capital, your father's company. If they think I am talking to you, Piper, they can destroy people. You know that. I know. I said, they tried to destroy me last night. They told everyone I stole money. Tessa closed her eyes. I knew they would use that eventually. It was the contingency plan. Contingency for what? For you, she said. She lowered her voice until I had to lean across the table to hear her. Piper, do you remember why you were fired? They said it wasn't a good fit. I said, but I know it was because I flagged that invoice, the one from Candlewick Consulting. Tessa nodded. You wouldn't let it go. You kept asking why we were paying $40,000 for strategic alignment services to a company that didn't have a website. You went to Gordon. I did, and he told me to stop playing accountant. He did more than that. Tessa said, after you left his office that day, he called HR. He told them you were acting erratic. He told them you were making wild accusations against board members. He started the paper trail that afternoon. He had them write up a complaint about your behavioral instability. My stomach twisted. So the theft accusation, it was planted, she said. They created a discrepancy in the books a few days later, just enough to look suspicious. But they never filed charges because they wanted to hold it over you, in case you ever spoke up about Candlewick. I sat back, the leather of the booth creaking. It was a setup, a long game. They had framed their own daughter as an insurance policy. Tessa, I said, what is Candlewick Consulting? She shook her head. I don't know. But after you left, the payments increased, monthly, for 2 years, and then, poof, the company dissolved. Do you know where they were located? She hesitated. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She slid it across the table under her hand. like a drug deal. I looked it up once, she whispered, before I quit. It is an address in an office park in North Cresthaven. Suite 404, thank you. Tessa, she stood up, buttoning her raincoat. Don't thank me, and don't tell anyone I gave you this. They will try to make you look unstable again. Piper, if you push this, they will say you are obsessed. They will say you are paranoid. Let them. I said, I am done trying to be the good daughter. She looked at me with a sad kind of respect. Good luck. Piper. She walked out, blending into the crowd, leaving me with an address and a confirmation that my parents were monsters. Suite 404 was not an office, it was a mailbox. I stood in the lobby of a generic brick building off the highway. The directory listed about 50 businesses for Suite 404, Apex Logistics, Blue River Holdings, Candlewick Consulting Group. It was a drop box, a shared address used to register shell companies. There were no employees, no desks, no strategic alignment services, just a slot where checks went in and paperwork came out. My father had been funneling foundation money, charity money into a shell company, and he had used my name to cover the initial test transaction. This wasn't just family cruelty, this was fraud. I sat in my car in the parking lot and searched for legal aid. I couldn't afford a high-powered attorney, and I certainly couldn't use anyone in Cresthaven. My father knew every judge and every partner in the county. I found a place called Bayline Legal Collective in the next city over. They handled whistleblower cases and employment disputes. I called them. They had a cancellation at 3 p.m. I drove straight there. Bayline Legal was the opposite of Marla Klein's polished firm. It was located above a dry cleaner. The waiting room had mismatched chairs and a stack of magazines from 2 years ago. But the air felt honest. Soren Patel was young, maybe my age, with sleeves rolled up to his elbows and a desk buried under files. He listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting. He didn't look at his watch. He didn't look at his phone. He looked at the copies of the emails I had printed out. So, he said, leaning back in his chair, let me get this straight. You turn 30, they stage a public disowning, they accuse you of a crime from 8 years ago, and they try to get you to sign an admission of guilt. Yes. Why now, he asked. I blinked. What do you mean? Why now? Piper Soren tapped a pen against his chin. If you were a problem in 2018, they handled it. They fired you. They scared you off. You have been low contact for a year. You weren't making waves. You weren't threatening them. Why blow you up publicly now? I don't know. I admitted, maybe they just wanted to be done with me. Soren shook his head. People like your father don't do things for emotional closure. They do things for tactical advantage, disowning you publicly, accusing you of theft that is a nuclear option. You use the nuclear option when you are trying to preempt something. Preempt what? A lawsuit, he said, or a leak, or a document surfacing that they can't control. If they discredit you first, if they make you the unstable, thieving daughter, then anything you say later looks like revenge. It looks like a lie. He looked at the papers again. You said the clerk mentioned someone else looking at trust filings. Yes. Soren narrowed his eyes. Trusts are usually tied to estate planning. Or inheritance rights. Piper, if you are a beneficiary of a family trust, you have rights to financial information. You have a right to audits. I nodded. I think so. If they wanted to remove you from a trust, or if they wanted to drain the trust without you noticing, they would need a reason, a valid legal reason to bypass a beneficiary. Like theft, I asked, or mental instability. Exactly. Soren said, this wasn't about hurting your feelings. This was about legally disqualifying you. They needed a recorded event where you were declared unfit. The birthday dinner was a performance for a judge they haven't met yet. I felt a chill go through me. It was so cold, so calculated. What do I do? I asked. Soren handed me the papers back. You don't sign anything. You keep that hard drive safe, make copies. Put them in the cloud. Give one to your friend. And you need to find out what changed recently. Why did the clock start ticking now? What is happening in your father's business, or the foundation that made you a liability this week? He paused, his expression softening. And Piper. You need to decide what you want. I want the truth. I said, "The truth is expensive," Soren said. "It will cost you your family. I mean, really cost you. If you go down this road, there is no Christmas dinner. There is no reconciliation. You are declaring war." I thought about the way my mother had looked at me, the way Grant had watched me with dead eyes. I don't have a family. Soren, I said, I have opponents. I went back to my apartment as the sun was setting. The space felt different, alien. It was filled with the artifacts of the life I thought I had framed photos of friends. A stack of design magazines, a dying fern, but now it felt like a temporary bunker. I made tea. I didn't drink it. I sat at my desk and pulled the hard drive toward me. It was a small black brick. I had put a piece of masking tape on it years ago and written, "Foundation, don't" in Sharpie, a warning to myself. Don't look back. Don't obsess. Move on. I peeled the tape off. I plugged it in. The drive whirred to life. I opened the folder again. This time, I didn't just look at the emails. I looked at the metadata. I looked at the properties of the PDF files. I found a document labeled board_resolution_August_2018_final.pdf. It was the scan of the signature page authorizing the budget changes. I right-clicked. Properties. Details. Created August 22nd, 2018. Last modified January 14th, 2024. 2 weeks ago. Someone had opened this file 2 weeks ago and modified it. But this was my backup. This was on my hard drive. No, wait, I looked closer. This wasn't the file on the drive. I was looking at a file I had downloaded from the Foundation's public portal years ago to compare. I checked the backup copy on the hard drive. Last modified August 22nd, 2018. I opened both. I put them side by side on the screen. On the left, my backup. The signature page showed 5 signatures. My father, the treasurer, 3 board members. On the right, the current official version. There were 6 signatures. The 6th signature was Grant Russell, but Grant wasn't on the board in 2018. He was 24 years old. He was working in sales. Why would they retroactively add Grant's signature to a document from 8 years ago? Unless they were trying to show he had authority back then. Unless they were trying to build a history of his involvement to justify something happening now. I sat back, rubbing my temples. It was a web. Manipulated paperwork. Public philanthropy covering private laundering. And me, the scapegoat. Part of me wanted to unplug the computer. I wanted to pack a bag, get in my car, and drive until I hit the Pacific Ocean. I could change my name. I could be a waitress in a diner in Oregon. I could just disappear. It would be so easy to let them win. They wanted me gone. I could give them that. But then I thought about the clerk. You weren't disowned tonight. You were erased. No, that wasn't the clerk. Who said that? My phone buzzed on the desk. The vibration made me jump. I picked it up. It was a text message. There was no name. Just an unlisted number. I opened it. Check your father's family trust amendments filed after your 22nd birthday. You weren't disowned tonight. You were erased. I stared at the screen. The words blurred. Erased. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about reputation. If they had amended the trust after my 22nd birthday after the theft, they could have altered the definition of my standing in the family. They could have legally defined me out of existence. I looked at the hard drive. I looked at the phone. I wasn't going to Oregon. I picked up the phone and typed a reply to the unlisted number. Who is this? The response came 3 seconds later. Someone who knows where the bodies are buried. Go to the courthouse. Piper. Look for the capacity evaluation. Capacity evaluation. The room seemed to tilt. A capacity evaluation was what you did for an elderly parent with dementia or a child with severe cognitive disabilities. It was a legal tool to declare someone incompetent to manage their own affairs. If they had filed a capacity evaluation on me, they weren't just disowning me. They were trying to declare me legally incompetent. They were trying to take away my ability to sign a contract, to hire a lawyer, to testify. The fear that washed over me was different from the panic in the car. It was cold. It was sharp. It was the feeling of a blade pressing against my throat. I wasn't a soldier anymore. I was a target. And the kill shot had been fired years ago. I just hadn't heard the sound until now. The office of Bayline Legal Collective looked even more chaotic in the morning light. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams that cut through the Venetian blinds, illuminating stacks of case files that seemed to defy gravity. Soren Patel was already at his desk. A half-eaten bagel balanced precariously on a legal pad. He looked up as I walked in, his expression shifting from distraction to concern. I hadn't slept. I knew I looked like a ghost haunting my own life, pale, dark circles under my eyes, wearing the same blazer as yesterday because I couldn't bring myself to care about wardrobe choices. "Sit down, Piper," he said, sweeping a pile of manila folders off the client chair. "You look like you have seen a murder." I sat, clutching my bag. "In a way, I have." I said, "I received a text last night, from an anonymous number." Soren stopped chewing. He leaned forward. "What did it say?" I pulled out my phone and read it to him, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Check your father's family trust amendments filed after your 22nd birthday. You weren't disowned tonight. You were erased." And then a second message. "Look for the capacity evaluation." Soren went very still. He didn't blink. He just stared at me, his mind clearly racing through legal statutes and precedents. "Capacity evaluation," he repeated softly. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot. "Piper, do you understand what that implies? I think so." I said, "It means they think I'm crazy." "No," he said, turning back to face me. "It is much more specific than that. In trust law, if a beneficiary is deemed incapacitated, unable to manage their own affairs due to mental defect or instability, the trustees can remove their control. They can redirect their share. They can appoint a guardian. They can effectively strip you of your legal agency within the scope of the trust." He walked back to the desk and leaned his hands on it. "If they filed an amendment based on a capacity evaluation, they aren't just cutting you off. They are claiming you are broken, legally broken. And if that evaluation exists, your performance at the birthday dinner, the instability they tried to provoke, was designed to be the public evidence that supports the private filing." I felt the blood drain from my face. It was a loop, a perfect, self-fulfilling loop. File the paper saying I am unstable. Treat me like a criminal until I snap. Use the snap to prove the paper was right. But I have never been evaluated. I said, "I have never seen a psychiatrist for a capacity test. I have seen a therapist for anxiety. Sure, but that is normal. I never signed off on a competency review. Then the document is either a forgery or a fraud." Soren said, "And we need to find it. Now." We spent the next 3 hours at the county clerk's office, but this time we weren't looking at the foundation. We were looking for Russell Crest Holdings. It was the entity my grandmother, Sylvia, had used to hold the family assets. The clerk was different today, a young woman with bright blue nails who chewed gum with a rhythmic popping sound. She didn't ask questions. She just took my ID, verified I was a listed party on the original trust formation documents, and handed me a tablet to scroll through the digitized filings. I scrolled past year after year of standard tax filings, 2015, 2016, 2017. Then I found it. Amendment to Trust Instrument, filed October 12, 2018, 2 months after I was fired, 2 months after the theft. My hand hovered over the screen. I felt sick. This was the moment where the erasure happened. I tapped the file. It opened. It was dense legal language, paragraphs of jargon about fiduciary duty and allocation of principal. But on page 4, there was a new clause. Section 4.2, removal of beneficiary due to incapacity. In the event that a beneficiary is determined to be of unsound mind or engaged in conduct detrimental to the integrity of the trust assets, their interest shall be converted to a discretionary stipend administered by the trustee, and then, attached as Exhibit A summary of clinical evaluation. I zoomed in. Subject Piper Russell, date of evaluation. September 30th, 2018. Evaluator, Dr. Vance Merritt, Ph.D. Summary findings. Subject demonstrates significant cognitive dissonance, paranoid ideation, and an inability to distinguish financial reality from perceived grievance. Subject is deemed high risk for asset dissipation. I stared at the words, paranoid ideation, inability to distinguish reality. It was a lie, a complete total fabrication. I had never met a doctor. Vance Merritt. On September 30th, 2018, I was working temp jobs and crying on Noelle's couch, wondering why my family hated me. I wasn't in a doctor's office. I printed the document. The pages were warm in my hands. Who is Dr. Vance Merritt? I asked Soren, who was reading over my shoulder. I don't know, he said grimly, but we are going to find out. Dr. Vance Merritt did not have an office, not anymore. A quick search revealed that he had died of a heart attack in 2020. His practice had been absorbed by a conglomerate called Hawthorne Wellness Group. I drove there alone. Soren had to be in court for another client. But he told me exactly what to say. Request your own medical records. Do not mention the trust. Do not mention a lawsuit. You have a right to your own file under HIPAA. Hawthorne Wellness was a sterile glass building that smelled of antiseptic and expensive candles. The receptionist was polished and guarded. When I asked for my records from Dr. Merritt's practice, she frowned. Those are archived. She said, it might take weeks. I can wait, I said, but I need to know if a file exists. Can you check the system? She typed for a moment, her acrylic nails clicking on the keyboard. Yes, she said, I see a file here. Piper Russell. Intake date, September 2018. My heart hammered. It was real. A file existed. I need to see it. I said. She hesitated, then printed out a summary sheet. Just the intake form. She said, the notes are in storage. I took the paper. Name Piper Russell, DOB, January 27th, 1996. Address 4400 Skyline Drive, Cresthaven. I stared at the address. That was my parents' house. I hadn't lived there in 2018. I had lived in a studio apartment on 4th Street. And then I looked at the signature line at the bottom. Patient consent. It was blank. There was no signature. No scribbled Piper Russell. Just a blank line. They had built a file. They had entered me into the system. But I had never been there. Someone my father probably had called in a favor or paid someone off to create a ghost record. A record that said I was crazy, just in case they ever needed to prove it. I walked out of the building feeling lightheaded. The sunlight felt too bright, the world too sharp. I sat in my car and just breathed, trying to align the reality of the trees and the traffic with the reality of the document in my purse. My phone buzzed. It was Grant. Coffee. I am at the daily grind. We need to talk. Please. I stared at the message. Grant. My brother. The one who had watched me at the dinner with that intense, predatory gaze. I shouldn't go. Soren would tell me not to go, but I needed to see his face. I needed to see if he knew about Dr. Merritt. I needed to know if he was a co-conspirator or just a pawn. The daily grind was busy. Grant was sitting at a small table in the corner, nursing a black coffee. He looked tired. His perfect hair was slightly messy, and he wasn't wearing a tie. He looked like the brother I used to know, the one who taught me how to ride a bike, not the corporate drone who had toasted to my erasure. He stood up when he saw me. He didn't try to hug me. He just gestured to the chair. Piper, he said, thank you for coming. I sat down. I didn't order anything. I just looked at him. What do you want? Grant, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, about last night. I didn't know it was going to be like that. Like what I asked. A public execution. He winced. Dad goes overboard. You know that. He thinks in terms of strategy. He wanted to make a point I asked, my voice rising slightly. He told 20 people I am a thief. He tried to make me sign a confession. I know. Grant said quickly. I know. And that was wrong. I told Mom it was too much. But Piper, you have to understand, they are under a lot of pressure right now. Pressure, financial pressure. Grant said, leaning in. The foundation things are complicated. The market hasn't been great. And with the audit coming up— What audit? I interrupted. He froze. He looked like he had said too much. Just routine stuff. The point is, they panicked. They feel like everything is slipping away. And when they panic, they control. You know that. He reached across the table and tried to take my hand. I pulled it back. Piper, please, just drop it. For everyone's peace. For Mom's peace. She is a wreck today. She can't stop crying. I looked at him. For everyone's peace. Too much. We just want to move on. These were Elaine Russell's phrases. I could hear her voice in his mouth. He wasn't speaking to me. He was delivering a message. Grant, I said softly. Do you remember August 2018? He blinked. What? The month I was fired. Do you remember it? Yeah. Sure. It was a tough time. You were struggling. Was I asked. Or was I asking questions about a vendor invoice? He looked away. Piper, don't start with the conspiracy stuff again. This is exactly what Mom is worried about. You get fixated. Fixated. Another Elaine word. Grant, I said, keeping my voice very calm. How much money did I steal? He looked back at me, confused. What if I stole money? How much was it? Was it 5,000? 50,000? He stammered. I don't know the exact number. It was significant. Was it cash or a transfer? It was funds. Misappropriated funds. He didn't know. He had no idea. He was repeating a script. Stole money. Misappropriated funds. Unstable. Grant, I said, did you sign a capacity evaluation for me? His face went blank. A what? Did you agree that I was mentally incompetent so they could change the trust? He recoiled. Jesus, Piper, no. What are you talking about? Of course not. He looked genuinely horrified. For a second, I believed him. Maybe he didn't know about Dr. Merritt. Maybe he was just the useful idiot, the son who signed whatever Daddy put in front of him without reading it. I stood up. Tell Mom and Dad that peace isn't an option. I said, not anymore. Piper, wait. I walked out. I didn't look back, but as I pushed through the door, I realized something. Grant was scared. He wasn't just worried about me. He was worried about himself. He was the golden child, but he was tethered to them. If the ship went down, he went down with it. I drove back to my apartment, my mind churning. Grant didn't know the details. That meant the circle was tight. Gordon, Elaine, Marla Klein, and maybe a few others. I needed to clear my head. I started cleaning my apartment, a frantic, nervous energy taking over. I organized my books, I scrubbed the counter, and then I found the old shoebox in the back of my closet. It was full of old phones, my graveyard of technology. An iPhone 6 with a cracked screen, an old Android from college. I picked up the Android. I hadn't turned it on in years, but something nagged at me. Sylvia. My grandmother had died in 2019. A year after the incident, we had been close, but in her final months, my father had restricted access to her. She is tired, he would say. She is confused. I found a charging cable that fit. I plugged the phone in. It took 10 minutes to charge enough to turn on. The screen lit up. I went to the voicemail. There was one saved message, dated November 12, 2018. I pressed play. The voice was crackly, thin with age, but unmistakably hers. Sylvia Russell, the matriarch who had built the family fortune before my father took the reins. Piper, honey, it's Grandma. I tried to call you at the apartment, but the number didn't work. Listen to me. Your father was here today. He brought papers. Papers about that trust mess. He says it is to help you, because you are sick. But you aren't sick, are you? Honey? You sounded just fine when we spoke last week. She paused. I could hear her breathing, a rattle in her chest. I didn't sign it. Piper, I told him I wouldn't sign it until I saw you, but he got angry. He took the binder back. Honey, if they make you sign anything, you keep a copy. You hear me? You keep a copy. Something isn't right. The numbers don't add up in the report he showed me. I love you. Honey, be careful. The message ended. I sat on the floor, clutching the phone. Tears streamed down my face. She knew. She had known they were lying. He says it is to help you because you are sick. They had tried to get her to sign off on the amendment. They had tried to use her authority to seal my fate, and she had refused. But the amendment was filed, which meant they had forged her signature, or they had waited until she was too weak to fight back. I wiped my face. This was evidence. This was a voice from the grave testifying to their intent. I called Soren. I have a voicemail. I said, from my grandmother. She says my father tried to make her sign the trust amendment in November 2018. She says she refused. Soren let out a low whistle. That is huge. Piper, if the amendment was filed in October and she was refusing to sign it in November, then the October filing is definitely fraudulent. Can we use it? We can. He said, but Piper, listen to me. If we use this, if we accuse your father of forging your grandmother's signature on a trust document, that is a felony. That is prison time. That is the end of his career, his reputation, everything. I know. I said, and it will be public. Soren continued, the moment we file a contest to the trust, it becomes a matter of record. The press will pick it up. Local philanthropist, accused of defrauding daughter. Your name will be dragged through the mud. They will release that capacity evaluation to the press to discredit you. They will say you are a vindictive, mentally ill daughter attacking her grieving family. Can you handle that? I looked at the phone in my hand. I looked at the hard drive on my desk. I thought about the way my father had looked at me at the dinner. The cold, calculated dismissal. We're here to disown you. He hadn't protected me. He had sacrificed me. I can handle it. I said, okay, Soren said. Then we draft the petition. But we need one more thing. We need to know who sent you that text. We need a witness on the inside. I didn't have to wait long. That evening, I got another text from the unknown number. Meet me at the Transit Plaza, lower level, near the ticket kiosks, 8 p.m. I went. The Transit Plaza was a brutalist concrete cavern, echoing with the announcements of arriving trains. It was cold and smelled of diesel. I stood near the ticket machines, watching the commuters rush by. At 8:05, a figure approached me. She was wearing a heavy coat and a wool hat pulled low. She looked nervous, checking over her shoulder. It was Tessa. My mouth fell open. Tessa, you sent the text. She nodded, her eyes darting around. Keep your voice down. But you were so scared at the cafe. You said you wouldn't talk. I know, she said, and I am scared. But Piper, I found something. She reached into her oversized bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I still have a key to the old storage unit the foundation rents. She whispered, my husband needed to pick up some old equipment for disposal. I went with him. I saw a box. It was in the shred pile. She handed me the envelope. It was labeled P, Russell Board Packet. I opened it. Inside were agendas, memos, and a document titled Risk Containment Strategy, Piper Russell. I looked at Tessa. Why did you save this? Because I read it. She said, Piper, they weren't just covering up a theft. They were terrified of you. Look at the memo from July 2018. I flipped through the pages. I found the memo. Subject Internal Audit Vulnerabilities. From Gordon Russell to Board of Directors Executive Session. It has come to my attention that the program coordinator P. Russell has begun inquiring into the Candlewick disbursements. Given her proximity to the raw data, this poses a significant exposure risk. We must accelerate the transition of funds and neutralize the inquiry. Recommended course of action, character-based discredit followed by termination. Neutralize the inquiry. Character-based discredit. It was all there, in black and white. My father planning my destruction like a military operation. But why, I asked. Why was the Candlewick money so important? Tessa looked at me, her face pale. Because it wasn't just money. Piper, I saw the other files in the box, the Candlewick checks. They weren't going to a consulting firm. They were being endorsed over to a political action committee, a PAC that was lobbying for zoning changes on the waterfront. I stared at her. Zoning changes. Your father wasn't stealing money for himself, Tessa said. He was buying influence. He was using charity money to bribe city officials to approve a development project. The Harbor View project, Harbor View, that was the massive luxury condo complex that had just broken ground, a project my brother Grant was heavily invested in. They were all in on it. My father, my brother, the foundation. If this gets out, I whispered, it's not just fraud, it's political corruption. Exactly, Tessa said. That is why they had to erase you. You were the loose thread that could unravel the whole sweater. She looked at the station clock. I have to go. My husband thinks I'm at the grocery store. Tessa, I said, grabbing her arm. Thank you. She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. I am sorry I didn't help you back then. Piper. I was a coward. You are helping me now, I said. She hurried away, disappearing into the crowd of commuters. I stood there in the cold station, holding the envelope. The weight of it was immense. I had the proof. I had the motive. I had the smoking gun. But as I turned to leave, my phone buzzed again. It wasn't Tessa. It was an email notification. From Clear Grove Compliance. Subject inquiry regarding formal complaint. Dear Ms. Russell, we have received a formal complaint regarding unethical conduct at the Russell Harbor Foundation. Please be advised that a counter-complaint has also been filed against you, alleging harassment and extortion, dated January 27, 2026. An investigator will be contacting you shortly. I stared at the screen. January 27th, the night of my birthday. They hadn't just disowned me, they had reported me for extortion the same night. They were trying to frame my reaction, my defense, as a crime. I looked up at the departure board. Trains were leaving for Boston, for New York, for Providence. I could get on one, I could run, but I looked down at the envelope in my hand. Risk containment strategy. I wasn't a risk to be contained. I was a daughter who had been betrayed, and I was done running. I walked out of the station, into the night, ready to burn it all down. The manila envelope Tessa had shoved into my hands at the transit plaza felt radioactive. I drove 3 streets away, pulled into the empty lot of a closed dry cleaner, and turned on the dome light. My hands were shaking, not from cold, but from a terrifying anticipation. I was about to read the autopsy report of my own relationship with my parents. I slid the papers out. They smelled like stale storage unit air and old toner. There were agendas, budget spreadsheets, and attendance logs. But pinned to the back was a memo printed on heavy bonded paper, stamped confidential in red ink. To Executive Committee, from Gordon Russell, date July 14, 2018, subject Risk Containment Strategy Internal. I read the subject line twice. Risk Containment. I forced my eyes down the page. The language was sterile, corporate, and horrifyingly detached. It has become evident that the current program coordinator poses a potential vulnerability to the operational discretion of the Foundation. Her persistent inquiries regarding the Candlewick vendor account suggest a refusal to align with organizational hierarchy, while familial proximity usually ensures loyalty. In this instance, it creates an exposure risk. I stopped breathing. Familial proximity. He wasn't talking about a daughter. He was talking about a security flaw. I read on. Recommended action: implement immediate reputational management protocols. We must neutralize internal dissent by reframing the narrative around the employee's reliability. A documented history of behavioral instability will be necessary to justify termination and discredit any future testimony regarding financial workflows. Neutralize. Reframing the narrative. Behavioral instability. I dropped the paper into my lap. I stared out the windshield at the dark street. For years, I had thought my parents were just strict. I thought they were disappointed in me because I was messy, or emotional, or didn't want to be a lawyer. I thought the conflict was about who I was. But this memo proved that was a lie. This wasn't about my personality. It wasn't about my failure to launch. It was a tactical decision. My father had sat at his mahogany desk, picked up a pen, and drafted a plan to gaslight his own child. Because I had asked a question about a $40,000 invoice. They hadn't just been harsh. They had treated me as a controllable problem inside an organization. I wasn't Piper. I was a leak that needed to be plugged. A wave of nausea rolled over me, followed immediately by a cold, hard rage. I started the car. I wasn't going home. Lindenbrier Road was quiet. It was always quiet. It was a street where the lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives, and the houses sat far back from the curb, hiding their secrets behind high hedges and wrought iron gates. I pulled into the driveway of number 4400. The house loomed in the darkness. A sprawling colonial with white pillars and black shutters. It looked perfect. It looked like the American dream. I got out of the car. I didn't ring the doorbell. I still had my key on my keychain, a relic I had never removed, perhaps out of some pathetic hope that I would one day be welcome again. I unlocked the front door. The foyer smelled of lemon polish and fresh lilies. The silence was heavy, pressurized. "Mom," I called out. There was no answer. I walked through the formal living room, past the piano no one played, and into the sunroom at the back of the house. Elaine Russell was sitting in her favorite armchair, a book open on her lap, a cup of herbal tea steaming on the side table. She looked up as I entered. She didn't jump. She didn't look surprised. She looked resigned. "Piper," she said. Her voice was flat. "You shouldn't be here." I walked over and dropped the copy of the memo onto the open pages of her book. The paper slid across the text. Elaine looked down at it. She didn't touch it. She just read the header. "I know. Mom," I said, "I know about the risk containment strategy. I know you and Dad discussed how to neutralize me." Elaine closed the book, trapping the memo inside. She took a sip of her tea. Her hand was perfectly steady. She didn't ask, "Where did you get this?" She didn't ask, "Why are you doing this?" She looked me in the eye and asked, "Who is helping you?" The question hung in the air, sharp and revealing. She wasn't shocked by the information. She was calculating the leak. She was terrified of exposure. "It doesn't matter who helped me." I said, "What matters is that you sat in this room, you drank your tea, and you let Dad plan how to destroy my reputation. You let him paint me as crazy." Elaine set the cup down. She stood up, smoothing the front of her cashmere cardigan. "You don't understand. Piper," she said softly. "You never understood the cost of what I asked, the cost of being a family, the cost of survival." She snapped. The mask slipped for a second, revealing a flash of desperate anger. "Do you think this house pays for itself? Do you think the influence your father has just happens? We were on the brink. Piper." The foundation was the only thing keeping the water out of the boat. She walked to the window, looking out at the dark garden. "Your father was trying to save everyone," she said. "The business, the reputation, your brother's future, and you. You were just poking holes in the hull. You wouldn't stop asking questions. You wouldn't just trust us. So you decided to sacrifice me," I asked, "to keep the boat afloat." "We didn't sacrifice you," she said, turning back to me. Her eyes were wide, pleading for me to accept her distorted logic. "We managed the situation. We tried to give you an out. We offered to pay for your apartment. We offered to get you help. If you had just played your part. Piper, none of this would have happened. You forced our hand." I stared at her. It was a masterclass in delusion. She truly believed it. She believed that destroying her daughter's sanity was a necessary form of triage. Dad was laundering money. "Mom," I said, "he was bribing city officials for zoning permits. That isn't saving the family. That is a crime." Elaine flinched. The word crime hit her harder than anything else. "He did what he had to do," she whispered. "Harborline Capital is auditing the legacy accounts." Do you know what that means? It means everything is being looked at. Everything. Gordon needs clean narratives. He needs silence. And instead, you are running around town digging up graves. She stepped closer to me. "Please, Piper, if you keep pulling at this thread, you won't just hurt your father. You will destroy everything. The house, the name, Grant's career. Is that what you want?" Do you want to be the reason we lose everything? I looked at the woman who had given birth to me. I saw the fear in her eyes, but I also saw the absolute selfishness. She wanted me to set myself on fire so she could stay warm. I am not the one who destroyed this family. Mom, I said, you did that when you signed off on the plan to erase me. I turned to leave. Piper, she called after me. It was a cry of panic. I kept walking. I walked out of the sunroom, out of the house, and back into the cold night air. My heart was breaking, but my resolve was hardening into something unbreakable. I hadn't even started my car when headlights swept across the driveway. Grant's sleek black sedan pulled in behind me, blocking my exit. He got out, leaving the engine running. He looked frantic. He must have known I was coming. Mom must have texted him. Piper, wait, he said, holding up his hands as he walked toward my window. Just wait a second. I rolled down the window 2 inches. I am leaving. Grant, move your car. Please, just listen, he said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a white envelope. He didn't look like the arrogant host from the party anymore. He looked like a man trying to close a desperate deal. I talked to Dad. He said, speaking fast, we can fix this. We can make this go away. How? I asked. By filing another capacity evaluation, no. He said, with this, he held the envelope up against the glass. It is a cashier's check. Piper, for $50,000, and there is a monthly stipend structure attached, $5,000 a month. For the next 10 years, I looked at the envelope. That was a lot of money. It was enough to pay off my student loans, enough to move to a better apartment, enough to breathe. What is the catch? I asked. Grant licked his lips. Just a standard NDA, non-disclosure agreement, and a mutual disparagement clause. You agree not to discuss the foundation, the family trust, or the events of your birthday dinner. You just live your life. You get to be free. Piper, financially free. I stared at his face. He really thought this was generosity. He thought he was the hero, swooping in with a check to solve the problem. It's hush money. Grant, I said. It's a settlement, he corrected. It is a way for everyone to win. You get security. We get privacy. Why is that so bad? I felt the temptation. I really did. I was tired. I was scared. I was facing a legal battle against people with infinite resources. Taking the money would be so easy. I could drive away, deposit the check, and never think about risk containment strategy again. But then I thought about the clerk at the records office. You were erased. I thought about the blank signature line on the medical file. If I sign that NDA, I said, does it say I admit to the theft? Grant hesitated. He looked away. Does it? Grant, it acknowledges that there were financial irregularities that the family has chosen to forgive. He mumbled. I laughed. It was a bitter, sharp sound. So you are paying me to confess. I said, you are paying me to cement the lie so that if I ever speak up again, you can show a judge that I took money to cover my guilt. Piper, be realistic. Grant pleaded. You can't win this. Dad will bury you in litigation. This is the best offer you are going to get. I rolled up the window. Move your car. Grant, I said through the glass, or I will drive through it. He stared at me for a second, seeing the look in my eyes. He saw that the sister he thought he could buy was gone. He swore, kicked the gravel, and got back in his sedan. He backed up, tires spinning, and I drove past him without looking back. Noelle's apartment was warm and smelled of pizza. I sat at her kitchen table, the memo and the board packet spread out in front of us. Noelle was typing on her laptop, her face grim. So, she said, we have the memo, we have the trust amendment, we have the blank medical file, and we have the witness account from Tessa about the shell company. Yes, I said. Do we post it? She asked. Do we put it on TikTok? Do we leak it to the Cresthaven Gazette? I shook my head. No, if we go to social media, they will spin it. They will say, I am manic. They will say I am hacking them. It needs to be official. It needs to be on a record they can't control. Soren had suggested the independent route. The foundation was a nonprofit. It was subject to oversight. We go to Clear Grove Compliance, I said. They manage the ethics hotline for the foundation. Tessa told me they are supposed to be independent third-party auditors. Noelle nodded. Okay, let's draft it. We spent the next 2 hours crafting the statement. We didn't use emotional language. We didn't use adjectives. We used dates, document names, and file numbers. On January 27, 2026, Gordon Russell publicly accused the undersigned of theft. Evidence suggests this accusation was a pretext to conceal fraudulent transfers to Candlewick Consulting Group, authorized by Gordon Russell, on August 14, 2018. Attached is a confidential internal memo dated July 2018, discussing the neutralization of the undersigned to prevent disclosure of said transfers. It was dry. It was boring. It was deadly. I hovered my finger over the submit button. Do it, Noelle said. I clicked. Complaint submitted. Reference 88,492. I sat back, exhaling a breath I felt like I had been holding for days. It was done. I had formally accused my father of fraud. I slept on Noelle's couch that night. I dreamed of drowning in a sea of paper, with my mother standing on a boat watching me go under, sipping her tea. I woke up to my phone buzzing. It was 8 o'clock. a.m. I looked at the screen. An email from Clear Grove Compliance. That was fast. Too fast. Usually, these things took weeks. I opened the email. Dear Ms. Russell, we have received your submission regarding the Russell Harbor Foundation. Due to the severity of the documentation provided, specifically the Internal Risk Management Memo, we are escalating this to a Priority Level 1 review. We would like to schedule a remote interview with you immediately to verify the provenance of these documents. Please respond to this email to confirm availability. I showed Noelle. Priority Level 1, she said, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Is that good? It means they aren't ignoring it, I said. It means someone at Clear Grove saw that memo and realized they might be liable if they don't investigate. I felt a strange surge of hope. For the first time, I wasn't just the crazy daughter. I was a whistleblower. I had allies. Faceless. Corporate allies. But allies nonetheless. But under the hope, there was a deep, aching grief. I sat on the couch, pulling my knees to my chest. I thought about my dad teaching me to drive. I thought about Mom making cinnamon rolls on Christmas morning. I thought about the way Grant used to defend me from bullies on the playground. I was systematically destroying the people I loved. I was handing over the evidence that could send my father to prison. I feel sick. I whispered. Noelle sat next to me and put an arm around my shoulders. I know, she said. It's okay to feel sick. You are grieving. Piper, you are grieving the family you thought you had. I am not just grieving, I said. I feel ashamed, like I am the traitor. You aren't the traitor, Noelle said firmly. You are the one who woke up, I replied to the email. I scheduled the interview for that afternoon. Then, another email pinged into my inbox. It was from the same sender at Clear Grove, but the subject line was different. Subject notice of existing case file, 88,490. I frowned. My reference number was 88,492. This file number was 2 digits lower. That meant it was filed just before mine. I opened it. Dear Ms. Russell, in preparation for your interview, we must disclose that there is an active, open case file referencing your name within our system. This complaint was filed on January 27, 2026, at 9:45 p.m., the night of the birthday dinner, while I was in the parking lot having a panic attack. The complainant, identified as Gordon Russell Board President, filed a report alleging harassment and threat to staff safety against Piper Russell. I froze. The complaint alleges that Piper Russell has made verbal threats of extortion against board members and has threatened to fabricate evidence regarding financial operations. This filing was marked as a preemptive security alert. I dropped the phone. He had beaten me to it, while I was driving away, crying. He had gone into his office, logged into the ethics portal, and filed a report saying I was going to do exactly what I just did. He had predicted my move. He had framed my whistleblowing as the fulfillment of his prophecy. She is unstable. She threatened to make up lies about the finances. Watch out for her. If the investigators believed him, my evidence wouldn't look like proof of fraud. It would look like the fabricated evidence he warned them about. I stood up. The room's spinning. He is always one step ahead, I said, my voice shaking. He planted the landmine before I even took the step. Noelle picked up the phone and read the email. Her face hardened. No, she said. This isn't checkmate. Piper, this is desperate. Desperate, I said. It's brilliant. He discredited me in advance. It proves he knew. Noelle said, think about it. Why would he file a report about you fabricating financial evidence if there was nothing to find? Innocent people don't file preemptive strikes about fake evidence. They just laugh it off. She grabbed my shoulders. He filed that because he knew you had the hard drive. He was terrified. This doesn't prove you are a liar. It proves he is guilty. I looked at her. She was right. But being right didn't make it safe. I wasn't just walking into an interview. I was walking into a trap that had been set for 8 years, waiting for this exact moment to snap shut. I took a breath. Okay, I said. If he wants a fight, he's going to get one. I went to the bathroom and washed my face. I put on a clean shirt. I brushed my hair. I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't see the scared girl from the birthday party anymore. I saw the woman my father was so afraid of that he had to invent a ghost story to keep her down. I walked back out to the living room. Let's do the interview, I said. The Clear Grove email sat on my laptop screen like a dormant virus. Case file 88,490. I called Soren Patel immediately. He didn't answer at first, which made my heart rate spike, but he called back 5 minutes later. I could hear the sounds of traffic in the background. I told him about the counter-complaint, the preemptive strike. Of course he did, Soren said, his voice tinny through the speaker. He sighed, a sound of professional frustration. This is Strategy 101, Piper. It is called DARVO, deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. He wants them to think I am the aggressor. I said, exactly. If you are framed as dangerous or harassing, then anything you submit, even hard evidence, gets viewed through a filter of skepticism. He wants the investigators to think, oh, this isn't a whistleblower. This is a disgruntled daughter acting out a vendetta. It makes me look unstable. I said, just like the capacity evaluation said. Soren paused. That is the goal. But here's the thing. Piper. He filed it at 9:45 p.m. Yes, that means he filed it after the dinner, after you stood up and told the room you had the hard drive. So, Soren said, his voice sharpening. It proves he was reacting to your knowledge. If he was truly afraid for his safety, he would have called the police. He didn't call the police. He logged into a compliance portal. That is a corporate move, not a safety move. We can use that. But they will still interview me. Right? Yes. And you need to be bulletproof. No emotion, no tears, just facts. Facts. I repeated. I hung up and looked at Noelle. I need more facts. I said, I need to prove that the dinner was a setup. I need to prove they walked into that room with the intention of destroying me. We drafted a subpoena request for the security footage from the glass marigold. Soren filed it as part of an emergency evidence preservation motion, arguing that the footage was relevant to the anticipated civil litigation my father was threatening. The restaurant, terrified of bad publicity, complied within 24 hours. I watched the video file on my laptop in Noelle's kitchen. It was a high-angle shot, black and white, silent. I saw the guests milling about. I saw myself walk in, looking small and nervous, and then I saw it. Timestamp 7:12 p.m., 20 minutes before the toasts began. My father was standing near the bar. Marla Klein approached him. She looked around the room, then reached into her oversized tote bag. She pulled out the thick manila envelope, the mutual separation agreement. She didn't just hand it to him, they spoke. My father nodded. He took the envelope, weighed it in his hand, and then slid it under his menu at the head table. He checked his watch. He said something to Grant, who nodded and patted his shoulder. It was rehearsed. They hadn't panicked because of my behavior. as Grant had claimed. They hadn't produced the paperwork because I was being difficult. They had brought the execution order with them. They had placed it on the table before I had even taken a sip of water. I saved the clip. Exhibit B, premeditation. I went back to the board packet Tessa had given me. I needed to understand the scope of the corruption. If my father was buying zoning permits, who was funding it? I scanned the donor lists. Most of the names were corporations or anonymous trusts. Blue River Holdings, Apex Logistics, the same shell companies. It was a circle of money laundering, feeding itself. But then, on a list from 2015, I saw a human name, Elliot Branford, $50,000. I froze. Elliot Branford. He was my father's old college roommate. He used to come to our house for 4th of July barbecues. He was the one who taught me how to throw a frisbee. He was kind. He always asked me about my drawings, unlike my father, who only asked about my grades. He hadn't been around in years. I assumed they had just drifted apart. I searched his name online. He was still in Cresthaven, living on the other side of town in a modest neighborhood near the university where he taught architecture. I found his faculty email. I typed a message. Dear Mr. Branford, this is Piper Russell. I need to ask you about the Russell Harbor Foundation. Please. He replied in 10 minutes. Meet me at Renfield Park, the bench by the duck pond. 1 hour. Renfield Park was a quiet, overgrown green space that felt a world away from the manicured lawns of Lindenbrier Road. I saw Elliot sitting on a bench, feeding ducks with torn pieces of bread. He looked older than I remembered, his hair completely white, his shoulders stooped. I sat down next to him. Hello, Elliot. He didn't look at me immediately. He threw another piece of bread into the water. Piper, he said softly. You look like your grandmother. I get that a lot lately. I said. He turned to me. His eyes were sad and tired. I heard about the dinner. People talk. Did they tell you I stole money? I asked. Elliot smiled. A faint, wry expression. Gordon has been telling people you were troubled for a decade. He was planting seeds long before the harvest. Piper, I felt a chill. 10 years. Since I was 20? Why did you leave the foundation? Elliot, I asked. You were a major donor. I wasn't just a donor. He said, I was on the audit committee. Back in 2016, 2 years before the Candlewick incident, I started seeing things. Elliot said, inconsistencies, money moving into accounts that didn't have clear beneficiaries. I asked questions. Gordon told me it was creative accounting for tax purposes, but I knew better. He wiped his hands on his trousers. I went to Sylvia. He said, my grandmother. Yes, she was still the chair emeritus then. She still had voting power. I showed her the numbers. I told her son was using the foundation as a piggy bank for political favors. What did she do? She was furious. Elliot said, she called an emergency meeting. She tried to force an independent audit. She wanted to bring in forensic accountants. My heart pounded. Sylvia had fought him, but Gordon outmaneuvered her. Elliot said bitterly, he rallied the board. He told them Sylvia was getting senile. He told them she was confused. He called for a vote of no confidence in her leadership. They voted her out. They pressured her to step back for health reasons. And then Gordon told me that if I didn't resign quietly, he would ruin my reputation at the university. He said he would fabricate evidence that I was the one mismanaging funds. The same playbook, the same threat. I resigned, Elliot said, looking down at his shoes. I was a coward. I walked away to save my tenure, and I left Sylvia alone with him. He reached into his jacket pocket. But before I left, Sylvia gave me something. She told me to keep it safe. She said, one day, Piper will wake up, and when she does, she will need this. He handed me a sealed envelope. The paper was yellowed with age. On the front, in shaky cursive, was written for Piper. My hands trembled as I took it. I haven't opened it, Elliot said. It wasn't for me. I tore the envelope open. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, smelling of lavender and dust. My dearest Piper, if you are reading this, then the cracks in the walls have finally shown themselves. I am sorry I could not stop them. I tried, But your father has become a man I no longer recognize. He is driven by a hunger that will eat everything, including you. I worry about you the most, my darling, because you are the only one who cannot pretend not to see things. Grant closes his eyes. Your mother looks the other way, but you stare right at the truth. That makes you brave, but it also makes you a target. They will try to make you doubt your own mind. Do not let them. You are the sanest one in that house. Trust your eyes. Trust your heart. I have left records with a lawyer in Boston, just in case. But there is something else you must check. Look at your birth certificate. Piper, look closely at the hospital name. They fixed the paperwork after the billing dispute, or so they told me. But your father always hated loose ends. I love you. Do not let them erase you. Grandma. I lowered the letter. Tears were streaming down my face, hot and fast. I couldn't stop them. It wasn't just sadness. It was relief. She saw me. She had seen me the whole time. You are the sanest one in that house. For years. I had walked around believing I was the broken one, the difficult one, the one who felt too much. And all along, my grandmother had known that my difficulty was just my refusal to participate in the lie. Piper Elliott asked gently. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I am okay. He nodded. You have allies. Piper, we were just waiting for you to call. I drove home with the letter on the passenger seat. I felt different. The fear was still there, but the shame was gone. It had evaporated in the park. I had an interview to do. I set up my laptop in my living room. I put on a blazer. I tied my hair back. I checked the lighting. I looked professional. I looked like a CEO. I logged into the Clear Grove portal at 2:00 p.m. sharp. Two faces appeared on the screen. A man and a woman. They looked serious, sitting in a conference room with a generic corporate art print on the wall behind them. Ms. Russell, the woman said, I am Agent Chen. This is Agent Miller. We are recording this session. I understand. I said, my voice was calm, lower than usual, grounded. We have reviewed your submission. Agent Chen said, the memo from July 2018 is significant. Can you explain how you obtained it? I did not explain Tessa. I did not explain the stolen key. It was provided to me by a former employee who wishes to remain anonymous due to fear of retaliation. I said, I have verified its authenticity by cross-referencing the dates with the Foundation's meeting logs, which are public record. Agent Miller leaned forward. You are aware that your father has filed a counter-complaint alleging that you created this document. I am. I said, however, if you examine the metadata of the digital files I submitted, you will see they were created on the Foundation's server in 2018. Unless I had a time machine, I could not have fabricated them last week. Agent Chen nodded slightly. She was taking notes. Ms. Russell, she said, in your complaint, you allege that the Candlewick consulting payments were fraudulent. Do you have proof of where the money went? I held up the board packet. I have copies of the endorsed checks. I said, they were deposited into an account held by Civic Forward PAC. I have also included a list of zoning approvals for the Harbor View project that coincide perfectly with the dates of those deposits. The agents exchanged a look. It was a subtle glance, but I caught it. They knew. Ms. Russell, Agent Miller said, his tone shifting. He sounded less interrogative and more collaborative. We have been tracking irregularities with Candlewick for some time, but we were missing the internal authorization link. The document you provided. It connects the board directly to the shell entity. I felt a surge of validation. They weren't interrogating me. They were confirming my lead. So you know about the PAC, I asked. We can't discuss ongoing investigations, Agent Chen said automatically. But your information is consistent with other data points we have. She looked at me through the screen. Ms. Russell, if this proceeds, you may be called to testify, not just in an ethics hearing, but potentially in a criminal proceeding. Your father's lawyers will come after you. They will attack your character. They will use your medical history. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the capacity evaluation. I thought about the dinner. They have already done that. Agent Chen, I said, they have already played their hand. I have nothing left to hide. The interview ended an hour later. I closed the laptop. I felt drained, but steady. I had done it. I had put it on the record. My phone rang. It was Soren. "Piper," he said, "we have a problem. What your father just filed a civil suit in Superior Court. Gordon Russell versus Piper Russell." I closed my eyes. "What is he suing me for? Defamation?" Soren said. "Intentional interference with business relations. And breach of fiduciary duty." Fiduciary duty. "I don't work there. He is claiming that as a former employee and family member, you had a duty of confidentiality that you breached by stealing proprietary documents. He is asking for an emergency injunction to stop you from sharing any more information. Can he do that?" "He can try," Soren said. "It is a SLAP suit, strategic lawsuit against public participation. It is designed to scare you, to drain your resources, to make you shut up." I felt a flicker of the old panic. A lawsuit, court, lawyers, money I didn't have. But then I looked at Sylvia's letter. "Do not let them erase you. Let him sue." I said, "Piper, this will be expensive. I don't care." I said, "If he sues me, I get discovery, right? I get to request documents from him." Soren paused. "Yes, technically. Then bring it on." I said, "If he takes me to court, he opens the door, I will subpoena everything, the trust, the medical records, the Candlewick emails, everything." Soren laughed. It was a surprised, delighted sound. "You are getting the hang of this. I am not playing anymore. Soren, I am finishing it." Later that night, I was sitting on my floor, surrounded by papers. The civil suit was a threat, yes, but it was also a sign of weakness. Gordon was flailing. He was throwing legal spaghetti at the wall to see what stuck. I picked up Sylvia's letter again. I read the last paragraph. "Look at your birth certificate. Piper, look closely at the hospital name. Why would she mention that? What did my birth certificate have to do with money laundering?" I went to my file cabinet. I pulled out my vital records folder. I found my birth certificate. It was a certified copy I had gotten when I got my passport. Piper Ann Russell, date of birth, January 27th, 1996. Place of birth, Cresthaven General Hospital, attending physician doctor, Marcus Thorne. It looked normal. I looked closer. Cresthaven General Hospital. I frowned. I had grown up in Cresthaven. The hospital was called Cresthaven Memorial Hospital. It had always been Memorial. Maybe it changed names. I Googled it. History of Cresthaven Hospital. It was founded as Cresthaven Memorial in 1950. It had never been called Cresthaven General. One word. General instead of Memorial. I looked at the document again. The font looked standard. The seal looked real. But the name of the hospital was wrong. And then I looked at the doctor. Doctor? Marcus Thorne. I searched him. He was a real doctor, an OB-GYN who practiced in Cresthaven in the 90s. But if the hospital name was wrong, was the document real, Sylvia said? They fixed the paperwork after the billing dispute. What billing dispute? My phone buzzed. It was Grant again. "Piper, please, Dad is going nuclear. He is talking about freezing your assets. Just take the deal. It is still on the table." I ignored the offer. "Grant," I typed, "why did you need the trust structure for your real estate venture?" He replied instantly, clearly desperate to keep me talking, "Because the lenders required a family guarantee. The Harbor View project is leveraged against the entire trust portfolio. If the trust gets tied up in litigation, the loans get called. I lose everything, the development, my equity, everything." I stared at the screen. There it was, the truth. Grant wasn't worried about Mom's feelings. He wasn't worried about family peace. He had leveraged the family trust, my trust, to back his risky condo development if I contested the trust. The assets would be frozen. The banks would pull the funding. Grant would be bankrupt. He had sold me out to secure a loan. I felt a cold, hard clarity. They were all parasites, feeding off the foundation, feeding off the trust, feeding off me. But the birth certificate, that was different. That wasn't about money. That was about identity. If my birth certificate was fake, who was I? I looked at the piece of paper, Cresthaven General. I grabbed my keys. I needed to go to the hospital, the real one. I needed to see the original records. I wasn't just fighting for my reputation anymore. I was fighting to find out if I had ever really belonged to this family at all. The morning after my visit to the hospital, I sat in Soren Patel's office with a certified copy of my birth certificate on the desk between us. The fluorescent lights hummed with a low, irritating buzz that felt like it was inside my own skull. I stared at the document. To the untrained eye, it looked perfect. It had the heavy bond paper, the raised seal, the signature of Dr. Marcus Thorne. But I had spent 3 hours in the basement archives of the real hospital, comparing it to their master log. "It is one letter," I said, pointing to the header. Soren leaned in, adjusting his glasses. "Look," I said, "the official legal name of the hospital in 1996 was Cresthaven Memorial Hospital. That is what is on every other birth certificate from that year. That is what is on the letterhead in the archives." I slid my finger to the document my parents had kept in the safe, the one they had used to establish my identity for the trust. Cresthaven Memorial Hospital. I read. Soren squinted. "They missed the L. They missed the L." I said, "And look at the spacing. The font is slightly different. The kerning is off. It looks like someone took a template, typed in the details, and made a typo." I sat back, feeling a wave of nausea. My parents didn't just lie about money. Soren, they forged my birth certificate. Why would they do that? Soren took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked tired. We had been fighting this war for 4 days, and it felt like 4 years. "Identity ambiguity," he said. "It is a niche area of trust law, but it is powerful. If the Piper Russell named in the trust documents is tied to a specific birth certificate, this forged one, and then you try to claim your rights using your real, state-issued ID, they can claim a discrepancy. They can claim you aren't the legal beneficiary." He looked up at me, he continued, his voice dropping. "They lost the original. Maybe there was an adoption issue. Maybe there was a custody dispute you don't know about, and they needed a clean piece of paper to make the problem go away. So they made one. I thought about Sylvia's letter. They fixed the paperwork after the billing dispute. It wasn't a billing dispute," I whispered. "It was an ownership dispute. They were trying to make sure they owned me on paper." Soren warned me not to jump to conclusions. "We can't prove why yet," he said, "but we can prove it is fake, and combined with the capacity evaluation that doesn't have a signature, and the altered board minutes. Piper, we have enough to blow the doors off." He tapped his computer screen. "Clear Grove has scheduled the hearing," he said. "Thursday morning, 9 o'clock, at Cresthaven Harbor Hall." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Thursday, 2 days away. "Who will be there?" I asked. "Everyone," Soren said. "The foundation board, the ethics committee, your father, your mother, Marla Klein, and because of the civil suit your father filed, there will be a court stenographer. This is it. Piper, this is the reckoning. I didn't sleep for the next 48 hours. I prepared. Noelle came over and we turned her living room into a war room. We taped timelines to the wall. We organized the evidence into binders. Exhibit A, the Candlewick shell. Exhibit B, the staged dinner. Exhibit C, the capacity fraud. I rehearsed my statement until my voice was flat and unshakable. I couldn't go in there as the emotional daughter. I couldn't give them a single crack to pry open. I had to be a machine. On Thursday morning, I dressed in a navy blue suit I had bought specifically for this moment. It was severe. High collar, sharp lines. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I wore no makeup except for a touch of mascara. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like Piper Russell, the graphic designer who liked vintage shops and indie folk music. I looked like a prosecutor. I drove to Cresthaven Harbor Hall. It was a modern glass and steel conference center overlooking the marina. The water was gray and choppy, reflecting the overcast sky. I met Soren in the lobby. He was wearing his best suit, and he handed me a coffee. "Ready?" he asked. "No," I said honestly, "but I'm doing it anyway." We walked into the conference room. It was massive. A long oval table dominated the center, surrounded by ergonomic leather chairs. The back of the room was lined with observers, junior lawyers, compliance officers from Clear Grove. At the head of the table sat the board chair, a man named Jonathan Vance. He was the CEO of a major logistics firm and had always been a distant, intimidating figure in my childhood. On the left side of the table sat my parents. Gordon Russell looked impeccable in a pinstripe suit, but his face was drawn. There were deep lines around his mouth that hadn't been there a week ago. He didn't look at me when I walked in. He looked at his papers. Elaine was next to him. She was wearing a cream-colored suit that made her look fragile and sympathetic. She looked at me, and her eyes filled with immediate, practiced tears. She reached for a tissue. Grant was there too, sitting behind them, tapping frantically on his phone. I took my seat on the right side. Soren sat next to me. Jonathan Vance cleared his throat. "We are here to review the formal complaint filed by Ms. Piper Russell regarding financial irregularities and ethical misconduct at the Russell Harbor Foundation," he said. His voice was deep and echoed slightly in the room. "We will also address the counter-complaint filed by Mr. Gordon Russell regarding harassment and security threats." He looked at me. "Ms. Russell, you may proceed with your statement. You have 10 minutes. I stood up. I didn't look at my parents. I looked at the board members. "Thank you, Mr. Chair," I said. My voice didn't shake. On January 27th, I was invited to a dinner under the pretense of a family celebration. I began, at that dinner, my father, board president Gordon Russell, presented me with a prepared legal document demanding I confess to a theft of funds from 2018. He claimed I was unstable. He claimed the family had covered up my crime. I opened my binder. This was a lie, I said, and it was a lie designed to conceal the truth about where those funds actually went. I held up a document. Exhibit A. I said, certified bank records showing that between August 2018 and December 2020, the foundation transferred over $400,000 to a vendor named Candlewick Consulting Group. I heard a rustle of papers from the board members. They were checking their own copies. Exhibit B. I continued. State incorporation records showing that Candlewick Consulting Group has no employees, no physical office, and was dissolved immediately after the payments stopped. The registered address is a Dropbox shared by multiple shell entities. I paused. I let that sink in. Exhibit C. I said, endorse checks showing that funds paid to Candlewick were immediately transferred to the Civic Forward PAC, a political action committee that lobbied for zoning changes benefiting the Harbor View Development Project. Gordon slammed his hand on the table. "This is preposterous," he shouted. He stood up, his face flushing red. "Mr. Chair, this is exactly what I warned you about. She is weaving conspiracy theories out of standard vendor relationships. She is unwell. We have medical records." "Sit down." "Gordon," Jonathan Vance said. His voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made my father freeze. Gordon looked around the room, realizing he had broken protocol. He sat down slowly, adjusting his tie. "Ms. Russell, please continue," Vance said. I didn't react to my father's outburst. I didn't flinch. "Thank you," I said, regarding Mr. Russell's claim that I am unwell. I turned to the next tab in my binder. My father has referenced a capacity evaluation filed with the Family Trust in October 2018. This evaluation purports to show that I was examined by a doctor, Vance Merritt, and found to be mentally incompetent. I pulled out the copy of the evaluation. "I have never met Dr. Vance Merritt," I said, "and Dr. Merritt cannot testify to this examination because he passed away in 2020. However, I have obtained the intake record from his practice." I held up the sheet with the blank signature line. The signature line for patient consent is blank. I said, "The address listed for me is incorrect. And I have an affidavit here from the office manager of the practice stating that there are no session notes, no billing records, and no clinical data associated with my name. Only this single, blank intake form." I looked directly at my father then. "The evaluation was fabricated." I said, just like the birth certificate my parents have on file, which lists a hospital name that does not exist. The room went dead silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop. Gordon's face had gone from red to a pale. Waxen gray. I wasn't done. Finally, I said, regarding the claim that I am a security threat, Mr. Russell filed a complaint at 9:45 p.m. on the night of the dinner. Claiming I threatened the board, I played the video clip from the glass marigold on the large screen at the front of the room. It showed Marla Klein handing the envelope to Gordon 20 minutes before the dinner began. This was premeditated. I said, they brought the paperwork to the dinner. They staged the event to provoke a reaction they could label as instability. The complaint filed later that night was not a safety measure. It was a strategic cover story. I closed my binder. I am not a thief. Mr. Chair, I am not unstable. I am a witness, and the documents before you prove that the leadership of this foundation has been engaged in fraud, forgery, and the systematic destruction of a whistleblower's reputation to protect their own interests. I sat down, for 10 seconds. No one moved. Then, Gordon stood up again. He didn't shout this time. He looked sad. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world. Jonathan, he said, addressing the chair, I am heartbroken, truly, to see my daughter so confused, so determined to hurt the people who love her. We tried to protect her. We tried to keep these matters private. The payments to Candlewick were for legitimate strategic consulting during a difficult market transition. The medical records. Well, denial is a symptom of her condition. He reached out a hand toward me. Piper, honey, he said, please, let us get you help. We can stop this right now. It was a brilliant performance. It was the concerned father, pleading with his sick child. For a second, I saw hesitation in the faces of the board members. They wanted to believe him. He was one of them. I was the outsider. But I had one card left. I stood up one last time. I have one final piece of evidence, I said. I pulled out the yellowed envelope Elliot Branford had given me. This is a letter from Sylvia Russell, I said, the founder of this organization. Gordon went rigid. It is dated November 2018, I said, 2 months after she was forced off the board. I opened the letter and read, Your father has become a man I no longer recognize. He is driven by a hunger that will eat everything. They will try to make you doubt your own mind. Do not let them. I looked up. She knew. I said, She tried to order an audit, and you forced her out. She refused to sign the trust amendment, and you forged her signature. This isn't just me. Dad, it is Grandma. It is Elliot Branford. It is everyone you silenced. I handed the original letter to Jonathan Vance. He took it. He recognized the handwriting. I saw his eyes widen. Vance read the letter. Then he looked at the capacity evaluation. Then he looked at Gordon. This hearing is suspended, Vance said. Gordon opened his mouth. Jonathan suspended. Vance repeated, his voice hard as stone. We are initiating an immediate independent forensic review of all foundation accounts dating back to 2015. We are also placing all executive authority in the hands of the audit committee, effective immediately. He looked at the security guards by the door. Please escort Mr. Russell and his family from the building. It was over. Gordon didn't argue. He didn't scream. The mask of the grieving father vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating look I knew well. He was already thinking 3 moves ahead. He was thinking about offshore accounts. He was thinking about extradition treaties. He turned and walked out. Grant followed him, looking like he was about to vomit. Elaine remained seated for a moment. She looked at me across the table. Her face was unreadable. Then she stood up, smoothed her skirt, and followed them. I walked out of the conference hall 20 minutes later. The wind off the harbor was fierce, whipping my hair around my face. I felt hollowed out. I had won. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. Elaine was waiting for me near the parking lot. She was standing alone by her car. Gordon and Grant were nowhere to be seen. I stopped. Soren put a hand on my arm, but I waved him off. I walked over to her. She looked at me. The tears were gone. The fragility was gone. She just looked tired. You were very good in there, she said. I didn't answer. You sound just like him, she said. When he is closing a deal, you have his cadence. I am nothing like him. I said. Elaine let out a short, dry laugh. You are exactly like him. Piper, you are relentless. You don't care who you hurt to get what you want. I wanted the truth. Mom, the truth. She scoffed. She looked out at the water. Do you know why we did it to save the money? I said. To save the reputation. No. She said. She turned to me, and her eyes were cold and empty. We did it because you wouldn't stop. She took a step closer. We thought if we made you the villain, she said softly, you would finally leave us alone. We thought if we broke you enough, you would just go away, and we could be a happy family again, without the one person who kept reminding us of what we really were. It hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't about the money, it was about the mirror. I was the mirror they couldn't stand to look into. You didn't want a daughter, I said. You wanted an accomplice. I wanted peace, Elaine said. And now we have nothing. She got in her car and drove away. I started walking toward my car. I just wanted to go home. I wanted to sleep for a week. Piper. I turned. It was Grant. He was leaning against my Honda. His arms crossed. What do you want? Grant, I asked. I have nothing left to say to you. He looked desperate. Sweat was beading on his forehead. Piper, listen. Dad is done. I know that. He is calling lawyers in the Caymans. He is checking out. Good. I said, but I'm not done. Grant said. He pushed off the car. Piper, I have a private account. It is not connected to the trust. It has about $200,000 in it. I stared at him. What, I can transfer it to you? He said fast. Today. Right now. All of it. Why, if you drop the part about the birth certificate? He said. If you just leave the identity stuff out of the final report? I laughed. It was an incredulous sound. You are worried about the trust. I said, you are worried that if my identity is questioned, the whole trust structure collapses and the bank calls your loan. Grant grabbed my arm. Piper, please. That project is my life. If it fails, I am bankrupt. I go to jail. I signed personal guarantees. Let go of me. Grant, I said. He tightened his grip. You owe me. I tried to help you. I offered you the settlement. I ripped my arm away. You didn't offer me a settlement, I shouted. You offered me hush money. You tried to buy my silence so you could keep playing developer with stolen money. I stepped back, shaking with rage. You can't purchase a sister. Grant, I said, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. You can't buy me back. You never treated me like a human being. You treated me like a liability, and liabilities don't negotiate. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing. He looked like a child whose toy had been taken away. Get out of my way, I said. He moved. He slumped against the car next to mine, defeated. 3 days later, the news broke. Russell Harbor Foundation under investigation for fraud. Prominent philanthropist Gordon Russell resigns. State Attorney General opens inquiry. I sat in my apartment, reading the headlines on my phone. My phone had been blowing up for days. Reporters, old friends, people who hadn't spoken to me in years. I ignored them all. I was packing. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew I couldn't stay in Cresthaven. The town felt poisoned. Every street corner, every restaurant reminded me of the lie. There was a knock on the door. I froze. Was it them? Was it the police? I looked through the peephole. It was a courier, a man in a uniform holding a thick envelope. I opened the door. Piper Russell, he asked. Yes. Delivery for you. Sign here. I signed. He handed me the envelope and left. It was heavy. There was no return address, but I knew the handwriting. It was my father's. I took it into the kitchen. I sat down. I stared at it for a long time. Gordon Russell was a man who never did anything without a reason. If he was sending me this, it was his final move, his checkmate, or his confession. I tore it open. Inside, there was a single file folder and a note. Piper, you win. You were always smarter than Grant. I should have backed you instead. Enclosed is the original. You were right about the template. We were sloppy. But you should look at the second page before you decide what to do next. Dad, I opened the folder. It was my original birth certificate. The real one. Cresthaven Memorial Hospital. I flipped to the second page. It was an adoption decree. Dated January 30th, 1996. Biological mother deceased. Biological father, unknown. Adoptive parents, Gordon and Elaine Russell. I stared at the paper. The world stopped spinning. I wasn't their daughter. I wasn't a Russell. The billing dispute, the identity ambiguity. It wasn't about owning me. It was about hiding the fact that I wasn't theirs. Sylvia knew, the cracks in the walls. I read the name of the biological mother, Sarah Branford, Elliot Branford. My breath hitched. Elliot, the man who fed the ducks, the man who had been kind to me, the man who had given me Sylvia's letter. Sarah Branford was his sister. I remembered him mentioning her once. She had died young. I was Elliot's niece. Gordon had adopted me. He had taken his enemy's niece and raised her as his own, all while destroying Elliot's career and pushing him out of the foundation. Why to control Elliot? To keep a hostage. I looked at the window. The sun was setting over the city I had lived in my whole life, a city built on lies. I wasn't Piper Russell, the difficult daughter of a corrupt dynasty. I was someone else entirely. I stood up. I walked to the window. The truth had freed me. I had burned down the house of Russell. I had exposed the fraud. I had won, but I was standing in the ashes, holding a piece of paper that erased my entire history. I had a choice. I could walk away. I could leave Cresthaven and never look back. I could be anonymous, or I could go to Renfield Park. I could find the man feeding the ducks. I could hand him this paper and ask him the question that would start a whole new story. Did you know, I looked at the adoption decree one last time. Then I grabbed my keys. I wasn't done yet. Thank you for listening to We're Here to Disown You. My parents announced at my 30th birthday. I grabbed the mic and said, "This story has been a journey through betrayal, gaslighting, and the ultimate reclamation of truth." Piper's fight against her family is a reminder that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us are the ones we need protection from. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please leave a comment below with your city or country. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more dramas about family secrets, revenge, and justice, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. And finally, I want to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in Piper's shoes? Would you have taken the hush money? And what do you think she should say to Elliot? Share your theories in the comments in English.